There you go, Francis.
Great. So, hi, everyone. It's become the habit that people straggle in, so we'll get going. Hopefully, we'll get some more folks here. Welcome to number 38 on The Secret Teachings. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation, then webinar series in progress as shown here. Previous episodes of this, The Secret Doctrine, and the new Treatise on Cosmic Fire series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar you wish to view. You can register for these webinars on the homepage of moriafederation.com. Okay, well, we made it to the last page of this subsection called Pymander, the Vision of Hermes, which is the final part of a chapter dedicated to Hermes Trismegistus. A quick recap on this subsection. After wandering in the desert, Hermes went into a deep meditation, during which he beheld the figure of a great dragon who announced itself to be Pymander, the mind of the universe. Pymander then revealed to Hermes a series of visions focused on the power of the word. The union of the word and the mind, Pymander said, produces that mystery which is called life. This was followed by revelations of the forming of the universe by the supreme mind working through, quote, another mind called the workman, the master builder, or the maker of things. The second mind is the solar logos. Then the supreme mind fashioned a, quote, glorious universal man in its own image, the Manu, or Adam Kadmon, who, peering down into the shadows of the lower subplanes, found and fell in love with a reflection of himself. Then, quote, the intelligent thing united itself with the unreasoning image or shape, that is, the soul united with animal man, and in so doing made possible the return path to what Pymander calls the sky man, which Theosophy calls the monad. Then Pymander revealed the path of light and life, quote, and man received the life and light of the great dragon, and of the life was made his soul, and of the light his mind. We closed the last session with, quote, he who through the error of attachment loves his body abides wandering in darkness, sensible and suffering the things of death. But he who realizes that the body is but the tomb of his soul rises to immortality. So let's start by rereading the three short paragraphs we were considering at the end of our last session. So let's start there. Could we get a reader, please?
I'll start there.
Great.
And when God had said this, Providence, with the aid of the seven governors in harmony, brought the sexes together, making the mixtures and establishing the generations, and all things were multiplied according to their kind. He who through the error of attachment loves his body, abides wandering in darkness, sensible and suffering the things of death. But he who realizes that the body is but the tomb of his soul rises to immortality. Then Hermes desired to know why men should be deprived of immortality for the sin of ignorance alone. The great dragon answered, to the ignorant, the body is supreme, and they are incapable of realizing the immortality that is within them. Knowing only the body which is subject to death, they believe in death because they worship that substance which is the cause and reality of death. Then Hermes asked how the righteous and wise pass to God, to which Poimandres replied, "That which the word of God, say I, because the Father of all things consists of life and light, whereof man is made. If therefore a man shall learn and understand the nature of life and light, then he shall pass into the eternity of life and light."
Thank you. Thank you, Biel. Okay, so first up, and when God had said this, Providence, with the aid of the seven governors in harmony, brought the sexes together, making the mixture and establishing the generations. And all things were multiplied according to their kind. Okay, this is very Lemurian, fifth subrace Lemuria, when um, the sexes were separated and began procreating. Anyway, the dictionary definition of providence is the protective care of God, which seems to work here. The governors are the seven heavenly men who influence humanity through astrology, rulership of the seven subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, as well as the chains, rounds, and root races. The inclusion of harmony is interesting. The only other use of this term was when the Manu, quote, peeped down through the seven harmonies and breaking through the strength of the circles made himself manifest to nature stretched out below. However, I suspect that what's meant here is something like the law of attraction, though it might also mean the influence of the fourth ray. So, said another way, the protective care of God, with the aid of the influence of the seven sacred planets and the law of attraction, brought the sexes together. Next up, he who through the error of attachment loves his body abides wandering in darkness, sensible and suffering the things of death. But he who realizes the body is but the tomb of his soul rises to immortality. This is clear enough. Darkness and the things of death represent an orientation towards form life. Realization that the body is but the tomb of the soul brings to mind the 20th arcanum of the Tarot, which we read about last time. Next, we have the first Q&A between Hermes and Pymander, which is instructive as much for what is not said as for what is. Then Hermes desired to know why men should be deprived of immortality for the sin of ignorance alone. The great dragon answered, "To the ignorant, the body is supreme, and they are incapable of realizing the immortality that is within them. Knowing only the body which is subject to death, they believe in death because they worship that substance which is the cause and reality of death." So Hermes' use of the word sin in his question carries the implication that, quote, being deprived of immortality for the sin of ignorance is a kind of punishment. But Pymander's answer gives the true perspective. In the words of Proverbs 23:7, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Or in Pymander's words, they worship that substance which is the cause and reality of death. Any thoughts or questions about anything so far? Anytime during this, you can jump in, ask a question, or make a comment. The second Q&A follows naturally on the first. Hermes' question is basically, how do we get there from here? Pymander's answer is learn and understand the nature of life and light. Okay, next up. Can we get a reader, please?
Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Hermes next inquired about the road by which the wise attained to life eternal, and Poimandres continued, let the man imbued with the mind mark. Is that the right word, Andrew? Endued?
Yeah.
Consider.
Yeah, it means endowed.
Okay, thank you. With the mind mark, consider, and learn of himself, and with the power of his mind, divide himself from his not self and become a servant of reality. Hermes asked if all men did not have minds, and the great man replied, take heed what you say, for I am the mind, the eternal teacher. I am the father of the word, the redeemer of all men. And in the nature of the wise, the word takes flesh. By means of the word, the world is saved. I, Thoth, the father of the word, the mind, come only unto men that are holy and good, pure and merciful, and that live piously and religiously. And my presence is an inspiration and a help to them. For when I come, they immediately know all things and adore the universal Father. Before such wise and philosophic ones die, they learn to renounce their senses, knowing that these are the enemies of their immortal souls.
Thank you, Martha. Okay, first up. Hermes next inquired about the road by which the wise attained to life eternal. And Pymander continued, let the man endued, it just means endowed, with a mind, mark, consider, and learn of himself. And with the power of his mind, divide himself from his not self and become a servant of reality. So this teaching has been the hallmark of the fifth root race. The first requirement is endued or endowed with mind, the endower being the soul. In DK speak, this is the mentally focused leading to the mentally polarized disciple, the latter taking place after the second initiation. This is followed by an admonition to mark, consider, and learn of himself, and with the power of his mind, divide himself from his not self. Learning of himself is the same as the Greek know thyself, the first of three Delphic maxims inscribed in the forecourt of the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. FYI, the other two were nothing in excess and certainty brings insanity. I love that last one. Here, Hermes gives more insight into the great maxim, know yourself, by suggesting that in pursuit of self-knowledge, one must divide his true self from his not self or personality aspect. We could call that the very definition of knowing thyself. The second admonition is, and become a servant of reality, or in DK speak, a soul-infused personality. Any thoughts so far about this? Next, Hermes asks, if all men did not have minds, a seemingly innocuous question, but revealing a lack of awareness of higher and lower mind, particularly higher, and thus drawing a strong rebuke. Take heed what you say, for I am the mind, the eternal teacher. The mind here meaning the monastic principle in its entirety, and thus the source of solar fire, from which all true teaching emerges, manifesting within the cycles of time as the ageless wisdom, but existing beyond time and space. And in Pymander, we have the personification of that principle. In fact, that's what's so particular about this doctrine, is that there's such a stress and importance on mind and the word. I saw a hand. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
Hi.
Go ahead.
So I thought the sons of mine, according to the secret doctrine, were the sons of the moon. Is that not correct?
The sons of mind are the solar angels, or the source of the soul aspect. That's the sons of mind. They're not lunar. The lunar would be that which they overshadow or send forth in the three worlds of human endeavor. Anyone else?
Yes, Sri Yanta Shanti says Krishnamurti would only ever say the mind and not ever my mind.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, well, you can see why, right? But, what does he say here? For I am the mind, right? Take heed what you see, for I am the mind. So it's the monastic principle, which is basically that entire second aspect, right? And yet it includes the intelligence aspect that manifests through the third principle. That's how it makes its way into the human kingdom. Okay. Anyone else? It's a great topic for discussion. Okay, next up, I am the father of the word. That's what I love about this doctrine. So many unusual perspectives, you could say. The father of the word. So this definitely identifies Pymander as the Logos, whose quote unquote daughter, Vash in Hinduism, and Kuan Yin in the Chinese tradition, is the personification of the word, which issues forth on the breath of the Logos. We studied this a lot in the Secret Doctrine series. DK tells us that the breath is associated with the Adi plane, Adi subplane of the cosmic physical plane, and the word emanates from the monadic plane. Next, the Redeemer of all men. So he's talking about Father of the Word, the Redeemer of all men. Ultimately an aspect of the Logos, but also of the Christ, the great Redeemer. In fact, the term Redeemer can be defined as the mediating principle between life and substance, or spirit and matter, which is the soul aspect. Next. And in the nature of the wise, the word takes flesh. So it's interesting, the nature of the wise. The ageless teachings find purchase in those who are, at least to some degree, agents of their true selves. You could say that the degree that you have soul contact is the degree that the word actually takes root, right? And this soul awareness, knowledge becomes wisdom. Then we have, by means of the word, the world is saved. So ultimately, the word is some aspect of the emanative vibratory presence. First of the Logos, who sends it forth which is then taken up by the monad, the triad, and finally the soul. Thus, it is not information, but rather an extension of the potency of deity, which in our solar system is the word of love, which is sent forth from the Logos. So, in our tradition, in this outer existence, the word is a form of, it's the form by which information is carried. But when it's capitalized and it pertains to an emanation from deity, it becomes a source of potency that actually impresses and informs substance. This word saves, quote unquote, for each of us through the response to the still small voice of the soul, and for humanity as a whole through restoration of the plan, as stated in the Great Invocation, right? This passage from Treatise on Cosmic Fire describes the final great triumph of the word. I include it here just to indicate the great potency, the all-encompassing purpose of the word. Can we get a reader, please?
Karen, can you read that for us, please?
He passeth on his way, sweeping the circle of the spheres and sounding forth the word. From the nadir to the zenith, from eve unto the day be with us. From the circle of manifestation to the center of prolaic peace is seen the enveloping blue, lost in the flame of achievement. Up from the pit of Maya back to the portals of gold, forth from the gloom and darkness, back to the splendor of day, rideth the manifested one, the avatar, bearing the shattered cross. Naught can arrest his return, nor can impede his path, for he passeth along the upper way, bearing his people with him. Cometh the disillusion of pain, cometh the end of strife, cometh the merging of the spheres and the blending of the hierarchies. All then is reabsorbed within the orb, the circle of manifestation. The forms that exist in Maya and the flame that devoureth all are garnered by the one who rideth the heavens and entereth into the timeless aeon.
Thank you, Karen. So, all this was brought on through the sounding forth of the word at that particular point where everything is reabsorbed in deity. Okay. Next, I, Thoth, the father of the word, the mind. Here, Hermes links three aspects of the Logos: thought, or divine ideation, personified by Thoth. He's literally thought incarnate. The word, the feminine emanative principle, and mind, the form aspect, that which is capable of receiving and holding the word. So he's that all in one. He's all aspects of the of thought, word, and mind. Then come only unto men that are holy and good, pure and merciful, and that live piously and religiously. Said another way, those who have sufficiently shifted their consciousness from interaction with the form aspect or attachment to the form aspect, and are thus receptive to the word. They've quieted the outer world enough to be able to hear the inner promptings, right? It's important to understand that this receptivity is not a reward for being pious, etc., but rather inculcating these qualities increases our receptivity to the voice of the soul. Next, and my presence is an inspiration and a help to them For when I come, they immediately know all things and adore the universal Father. Okay, this is, an over-the-top devotional six-ray approach. Adoring the universal Father could also be described as being immersed or identified with the one life. Quote unquote, immediately knowing all things suggests access to the intuition, which is the highest function of mind, right? So when he says, for when I come, and of course the I that he's talking about is both word and mind. So when you come into the field of higher mind, which is the presence of the soul, then you will know all things. That's through the sense of the intuition, and adore the universal Father. Finally, before such wise and philosophic ones die, they learn to renounce their senses, knowing that these are the enemies of their immortal souls. So dualistic. The idea that one's senses are enemies is, occultly, it's misleading. Rather, it is attachment to what the outer senses reveal that blocks our awareness of the subtler realms, not the senses themselves. So any thoughts or questions on anything in these two paragraphs?
We've got a comment from Tara. She says, like the great red dragon, a honeybee lion. I'm not quite sure I understand that. Maybe Tara, would you like to clarify?
Well, I get the lion part. The honeybee comes from Venus. The great red lion is one of the names for the solar logos. Do you want to comment more on that?
I'm just reading a lot of alchemy. I'm working on the Splendor Solus, and so it makes sense. I guess I'm thinking out loud and sharing what I've learned and what I'm going through. Yeah.
And I'm glad you are. That's
Thank
that's
you.
great. We don't have to be able to explain everything that we that our intuition brings to the fore. If you can, great. Otherwise, it's the imagery sometimes stands by itself. To portray the sense of connection. Okay. All right. So next up. Could we get a reader, please?
Yvonne, can you read that, please?
Yes. I will not permit the evil senses to control the bodies of those who love me, nor will I allow evil emotions and evil thoughts to enter them. I become as a porter or a doorkeeper and shut out the evil, protecting the wise from their own lower nature. But to the wicked, the envious, and the covetous, I come not, for such cannot understand the mysteries of mind. Therefore, I am unwelcome. I leave them to the avenging demon that they are making in their own souls. For evil each day increases itself and torments man more sharply, and each evil deed adds to the evil deeds that are gone before, until finally evil destroys itself. The punishment of desire is the agony of unfulfillment.
Okay, well, this vision of Pymander was translated in, I think, the 2nd century AD, and by some of the church fathers. We're lucky that they kept as much intact as they did. This to me sounds like thundering of an Old Testament God. You have that kind of tone to it. First up, I will not permit the evil senses to control the bodies of those who love me, nor will I allow evil emotions and evil thoughts to enter them. So the word evil, as used here, is particularly prejudicial, at least I find it so. In modern theosophical thought, the senses are not evil, nor are the emotions. They are rather instruments of perception that can blind us when those instruments are oriented to the form aspect. But later on the higher planes, their counterparts, those instruments of perception can link us to the higher realities. More interesting here. Oh, I saw a hand jump up there.
It was me again. I was just saying, it sounds like he's controlling their free will to choose between good or evil.
Yeah.
And what we're supposed to do is taken away.
Yeah, exactly. There's a sense of that, isn't there? Yeah, that it's stepping on their free will. Yeah, to me, more interesting here is Pymander's statement about control. This is what you're talking about. He seems to be protecting his own against the influence of their own senses, emotions, and thoughts. Or is it just another way of saying that once a disciple comes under the influence of the higher mind, such a one as Pymander, their senses, emotions, and thoughts naturally turn towards the higher realities? It's like it's in an Old Testament kind of code for this higher teaching. It's funny too, because this, it's not consistently like this. They're very illumined. We've read much of it. Very, very illumined parts of this doctrine. And then it will fall into an area like this. But still, the truth can usually be discerned. Next, I become as a porter.
Well, we have a second hand.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tara.
Hi. So according to the treaty on the the esoteric astrology by Alice Bailey, it talks about the senses are previous hierarchies that have already passed. And so I think that's what they're talking about in this regard. And they're talking about making a third world when you're well, I think that's what they're talking about. And that's on page, if you have esoteric astrology, that's on page 36.
Okay.
And yeah, so thank you.
Well, it's natural that anything related to the form nature, including the lower senses, and by lower, I don't mean the prejudicial of bad. I mean the senses as they function on the physical plane. All of that is going to have been developed in a previous cycle, and there's a time when that was really the goal, integrating the senses. Even in the Lemurian or root race, the whole point was the integration of the physical with the etheric body, and that would involve the becoming fully aware of that which comes through the senses, right? But then there comes a time when the disciple orients himself to the higher counterparts of those senses. And you can find those in Treatise on Cosmic Fire, page 188. It lists every subplanes, the sensors on the astral plane, the sensors on the mental plane, etc., going right up through the Atmic. And you'll get through those senses, you will understand not only how the line of senses are related, but how they become a path to connect to the soul and the higher realities. Okay, let's see. Okay, next, I'm trying to find where this is. Yeah, here we go. I become as a porter or doorkeeper and shut out evil, protecting the wise from their own nature. So, my first inclination is to say, hey, where do I sign up? Great, you have this all-protecting entity, But is it really desirable? And somebody brought this up, really it's just like interfering with free will, right? Is it really desirable to be protected from your own lower nature? It seems to me that the hard inner work that gradually takes us to the threshold of the third initiation tempers us and is thus critical to our spiritual growth. I mean, it's the plan. Again, I suspect that the higher truth of this statement is that once a disciple comes under the influence of the soul or of the mind, he or she is inherently protected by that influence, right? Next. But to the wicked, the envious, and the covetous, I come not, for such cannot understand the mysteries of mind. Therefore, I am unwelcome. More Old Testament language sounds punitive, but there's a clue to a theosophical interpretation of this passage, and it's found in the words, therefore I am unwelcome. So if one is still materially oriented and is thus still gathering experience exactly as they're supposed to be through such aspects of kama manas as envy and covetousness, that person will be unable to tune in or have any desire to tune in to the high vibration of such a one as Pymander. Any thoughts about this? There's a real difference between, hey, you get it right, and recognizing that the unfoldment of consciousness takes place over millennia, and that those who are still wicked and covetous, unless, of course, they've become, brothers on the dark of the dark brotherhood and are willfully doing that, but that's only teeny percentage. Most people who are doing this are still learning, the ropes of personality life, right? They're in the halls of ignorance, and in their own way are on the path. Okay.
Francis?
Yeah.
We have a comment from Sri Yantra Shanti. Wouldn't that protector be a metaphor for our own higher consciousness,
Yeah, I think.
protecting us from our lower natures, hence still free will?
Yeah, exactly. That's going to be the esoteric reading, is that once you've connected, once you've, even before you build the Antakarana, that's the ultimate. But, once you have formed a link with the soul and the observer comes to life, and you can begin to be impressed by the voice of the soul. Once that happens, just by that fact, you fall under your own soul's protection. That's not the words, that's not the way in which this is written. This is, written like the great guru, who protects all those who come to him. And you have to read between the lines to find the truer understanding. Nobody gets a free ride, and there is no one who's damned out of hand just because in this life they're envious or covetous. It's ridiculous, Okay. So next up, I leave them to the avenging.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I was talking to you and I didn't have my mic on. Tia says this is very reminiscent of chapter 16 of the Gita and poses an interesting juxtaposition.
Well, I can't bring it to my recall based on the number, but I'll take you at your word. I'm sure there are parallels. Yeah. In fact, this choice, this divide, between to choose alignment with the mind or Pymander and alignment with the senses or the world wherein the senses demonstrate, that's not unlike, the Kurukshetra and that the great choice that Krishna posed to Arjuna. So, yeah, interesting.
She clarifies it's a discussion of the two paths, divine qualities versus demonic qualities.
There you go. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Interesting.
And then Tara says, building the antakarana comes before the third initiation, I believe. Can you explain that the ultimate is building the antakarana?
Well, ultimate in, within the parameters of breaking free of the lower, the influence. It's not any kind of final ultimate, but it's what connects us to triadal influence, right? So, in doing that, you get a glimpse of the monad through its expression in the triad. And it's typically connected with that third, fourth initiation, even though I think aspects of it can be experienced before that time. But anyone who's actually has some, for instance, the second stage of building the antakarana is to seat yourself in your aspiration, and in using the imagination link to the intuition. Well, once you have made that link, you have connected with what's called the mind or Pymander, and you're free from, maybe not from the influence of, but certainly from the control of the lower aspects. Anyone else?
Oh, yes, we've got lots. Vivian says this is similar to the temptations of Jesus in the desert.
Absolutely. There's, you probably could find in every, this is what made Joe Campbell rub his hands with glee, right? Because what he found is the same stuff all over the world. In every single spiritual discipline, you have this type of material because it's universal. You will come to this place, if you are attempting to become soul infused, and I mean, that's just the theosophical words, for it. But, in this speak, it's, in the words of Pymander, it would be coming in under the influence of the mind, right? So yes, it's universal. Absolutely. Anyone else?
Yes, lots. Efrosini says, ancient thought seems to be very dualistic in relation to the external senses, which are demonized here, and the higher mind. It seems that today the entry of seventh ray has decreased this gap. The demonic is not between senses and thoughts, but between selfishness and unselfishness.
Yeah, some really good thoughts there. Indeed. Yeah. And I think there is a further enlightenment, but you have to remember that, in the ancient cultures and the mystery schools, there was always the lesser mysteries, which were mostly concerned with purification. And if we have any records at all of them, it's those lesser mysteries that we're aware of. And then the greater mysteries, which were absolutely secret, and so effectively secret that we can only guess at what was being taught. And so this is the language of the lesser mysteries. You can bet that if you were working directly with Hermes and, who was the great avatar of that age, and entered the greater mysteries with him, this kind of divisive dualistic language would not be a part of that teaching. That's my guess, but there's been hints, this course has been going on for almost, it's over 3 years now. And, a large part of it was covering the ancient ageless mystery schools, from, the schools of the Celtics and the Druids, into the Northern European with Wotan, and then all through, especially around the Mediterranean, the different schools, the Mithraic, and finally the Gnostic schools. I think we covered about a dozen schools, and it was amazing how similar they were, and they all have an outer language, and this is like that outer language, though I find it inherently incredibly esoteric. I mean, we could go back through some of these paragraphs, and they're not written like this. They're not, but to the wicked, the envious, and the covetous. It's not like that. It's pure teaching, in some of the earlier paragraphs. Like the vision where he's literally lifted beyond the realms of the solar system and is shown the personification of stars, the actual persona of the logos. I mean, where do you find that kind of teaching? And it's earlier in this. Okay, anyone else?
Yes, a couple more. Sri Yantra Shanti says, my understanding is that we build our own antakaranas through our own spiritual practices by whatever holy school.
Oh yeah, I think so. Theosophy has a very particular occult method, right? But I think not only Theosophists go to heaven, otherwise there'd be very, very precious few people in the Buddhic realm, right? Certainly, all the major practices have an inner form that allows for ascension. And what does they say when the pupil asks, the teacher will appear. And that's an inner asking through your very incarnation, that what you need for that incarnation comes to you. And yes, in that is the setting up of the building of the Antakarana. Anyone else?
Yes, Tara says, I found the Antakarana is used with the Hebrew tree of life. And then she goes on and says, universal. Yes, love it.
Absolutely. It is a 10-step program, right? The tree of life, right? Those Sephiroth. It's, you pass, and the channels between the Sephiroth are all named and explored. It's a marvelous teaching. HPB gets into it, and as a result, we'll be looking at some of it in the Secret Doctrine if we live long enough. But there's absolutely it's a fabulous path to take, that study. Anyone else?
I think that's the end of it for right this minute.
Well, I'm thrilled when we have these kind of discussions. To me, that's the best part of these webinars. Okay, next up, I leave them to the avenging demon that they are making in their own souls. Isn't that an interesting phrase, that they are making in, he gives responsibility to those who are focused on the material aspect. For evil each day increases itself and torments man more sharply, and each evil deed adds to the evil deeds that are gone before, until finally evil destroys itself. So the avenging demon is the increase in appetite for the form aspect, a necessary phase before the despondency of satiation. Again, the last 4 words give us the clue, quote unquote, evil influence finally burns itself out, and the search for truth is then redirected, or the way he says it, finally evil destroys itself. Okay. And then finally, the punishment of desire is the agony of unfulfillment. Thus are the lessons learnt in the halls of ignorance that eventually lead us into the halls of learning. And if truth be told, you spend a lot of time in both halls simultaneously. You don't just like leave one hall forever. You know, is everybody in this webinar completely beyond personality craving, personality influence? You know, if so, you probably need a new teacher, because I certainly am not, you know, but I am very definitely, and as are, I know you all, in under the influence of the halls of learning. So it's that great transition time, which is he's directing our attention to, right? It's just in this sort of old church language. So this whole passage suggests a relationship between guru and disciple that is no longer employed, wherein the teacher demanded absolute obedience and in exchange took personal responsibility for his or her students, thus shielding them from the outer world. That was the way for millennia. You know, I think it was somewhere in the description of the conclave of 1875, DK says, this method that I just described was being let go of. The old way of the guru shielding the student was being let go of as a path. So even that recently, you know. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Yes. And Veronica, can you read that for us, please?
Hello.
Hello.
Hermes bowed his head in thankfulness to the great dragon who had taught him so much, and begged to hear more concerning the ultimate of the human soul. So Epimandres resumed, at death, the material body of man is returned to the elements from which it came, and the visible divine man ascends to the source from whence he came, namely the eighth sphere. The evil passes to the dwelling place of the demon, and the senses, feelings, desires, and body passions return to their source, namely the seven governors, whose nature in the lower man destroys, but in the invisible spiritual man gives life.
Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you.
Okay, so after Hermes' expression of gratitude, Pymander continues. At death, the material body of man is returned to the elements from which it came, and the invisible divine man ascends to the source from whence he came, namely the eighth sphere. So the bodily elements are water and earth, which earlier in this dialogue were unable to ascend with the pillar of fire when the four lower planes were created. Obviously, this is not the eighth sphere of theosophy or of the Gnostics, who recognized it as, quote, composed of the leftovers or unredeemed forces left behind by the sevenfold chain of spheres in their onward rush of evolution, right? And the eighth sphere in theosophy is those who are so determined to link and stay oriented to lower mind and develop lower mind that eventually the connection with the soul is broken, and they enter a place adjacent or an adjunct to lower mind, which is called the eighth sphere. You know, talk about a fate worse than death. There it is, and then they're stuck there until the end of manifestation when they're reabsorbed. But it's not that. It is, in fact, at the opposite end of the spectrum, this starry realm of liberation that stands beyond the influence of the seven planets, called in this chart the soul of the world. Next up, the evil passes to the dwelling place of the demon, and the senses, feelings, desires, and body passions return to their source, namely the seven governors, whose nature in the lower man destroy, but in the invisible spiritual man give life. It's kind of a recapitulation of what he's been talking about. So let's take a a look at this passage from Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike's great opus magnum, that further describes this understanding of the eighth sphere. Could we get a reader, please?
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Perfect.
Soul, reaching the region reality inhabits, tends to a terrestrial body and is deemed to die. Let no one, says Macrobius, be surprised that we so frequently speak of the death of this soul, which yet we call immortal. It is neither annulled nor destroyed by such death, but merely enfeebled for a time, and does not thereby forfeit its prerogative of immortality. For afterward, freed from the body, when it has been purified from the vice stains contracted during that connection, it is reestablished in all its privileges and returns to the luminous abode of its immortality, entering naked and pure into the eighth sphere or highest heaven.
Yeah, you develop a taste for Albert Pike. He just has such a beautiful way of stating. Isn't this a great description of the what's called by decay? And he doesn't talk about it a lot, but he does mention it, the human soul, right? Seems like a contradiction, but it means that soul in its aspect of being trapped by in incarnation. And he beautifully describes how, it's in no way enfeebled by that entrapment, right? Yeah, any thoughts about this? Questions? Okay, this shows, by the way, I've shown you other maps of this, the progression through the 7 planets, ending in the gates of Saturn, where you're released into the starry realm, which would be the 8th sphere. Is that number 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. So then this highest level. Okay. Next up, can we get a reader?
Tara, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. After the lower nature has returned to the brutishness, the higher struggles again to regain its spiritual estate. It ascends the 7 rings upon which sit the 7 governors and return to each their lower powers in this manner. Upon the first ring sits the moon, and to it is returned the ability to increase and diminish. Upon the second ring sits Mercury, and to it are returned
Machinations.
deceit, and craftiness. Upon the third ring sits Venus, and to it are returned the lusts and passions. Upon the fourth ring sits the sun, and to this lord are returned ambitions. Upon the fifth ring sits Mars, and to it are returned rashness and profane boldness. Upon the sixth ring sits Jupiter, and to it are returned the sense of accumulation and riches. And upon the 7th ring sits Saturn at the gate of chaos, and to it are returned falsehood and evil plotting.
Okay. First, after the lower nature has returned to the brutishness, the higher, which just means the brute is a term for animal man, and we inhabit animal man bodies, right? So that's returned to that aspect. The higher struggles again and regains its spiritual estate. So the quote unquote higher is the imprisoned soul of the ancients, personified by Persephone, Ishtar, and all the other lunar goddesses, which DK calls the human soul, reflecting the divine soul. The rest of this passage is, to my eyes, exoteric and geocentric, reflecting the personality aspects ascribed to the planets by the ancients. I don't see any real any real need to explore the connections here. There is, the planetary influences obviously have a much higher influence on humanity. In esoteric astrology, DK says that the planets in connection with the houses have a certain influence, and it tends to be a personality influence. So we might relate that to what's being described here. But then when the planets come into association with the constellations, their influence is elevated, right? So I don't know if any of you astrologers want to comment on this, but that's my understanding.
Francis?
Yeah.
Oh, I like the way that this is laid out, and we know DK tells us in esoteric astrology that we're still working with both. We're still working with the lower energies and the higher energies. So it's good to understand their nature mundanely, like this is telling us, as well as their higher correspondences. And so I think that's good in that regard. It's also, it brings up the point that you mentioned about the houses. He tells us that's personality based, but then he brings us to the point of looking at the houses in relation to the soul. So it's
Oh.
a combination, it's a combination of both.
Hmm.
He doesn't outline it all for us. He gives us the first house and tells us to figure out the soul houses, and many astrologers have done that. So there's the correspondences out there. But the point is, this is valid information, and we're still struggling with that personality. So we have to look at the influences from all different angles.
Yeah, good. Thanks. Thanks, BL. In your mind, do these, up front, I'll just tell everybody I'm not at all a traditional astrologer. I'd never cast a chart or had an astrological client, even though I've been drafted to do the two above things.
Even though you're really good at it.
So, given that disclaimer, would you say that these negative qualities associated with these different planets, as we're going through them here, do they seem accurate to you in what you'd call modern exoteric astrology?
Yes, I think they're a lot of the worst case scenario, and I'm not quite sure I understand the moon. Return the ability to increase and diminish, other than it's waxing and it's waning.
Well, I think it may just be literally the ability to go in and out of incarnation.
Yeah, that could be, because it stands for the form.
And it's the first one, so that's the first thing you give up.
Okay. At Mercury, sure. Certainly there's the machinations there, and the deceit and the craftiness at the worst of Mercury. And Venus, the lusts and passions at the worst of Venus.
So like Taurus, exoteric ruler kind of thing, huh?
Yeah. And the sun, and personal ambitions, the me thing there. Mars, the rashness and profane boldness. We all have these planets in our chart, and we all express them in some way, but let's hope none of us are expressing them to the degree that they have here. But yes, it's pretty dead on the worst of these planetary energies. So
it's a beautiful idea that your higher nature ascends out of these influences, and let me pull that. Where is it? Oh God, sometimes I think it's close and it's not. Where is it?
it wasn't very far. There you go. That.
Yeah, that and upon your death that you ascend and you leave behind these influences. I love that idea. As you return to the soul, of course, when you're reabsorbed by the soul, that would be, equivalent of this starry realm,
I also was thinking of it in terms of as we clean up our act, as we work on one layer at a time, we're we're getting to the higher heaven
Right.
by the act of cleaning it up, and that's the same thing as expressing more and more of the soul. So Yvonne's got her hand up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Yvonne.
Go ahead.
I think BL, that's great. It's a great inventory to do. If I have any of these lower qualities, I know where I worked, where my planets are in my chart, and I think it's pretty on for the lower exoteric characteristics. And then this first part, after the lower nature ascends, I think I'm seeing in this is like we let go of the soul for a while, but we do this in this lifetime at the fourth initiation. We release the soul, and we're in the triad, but then we do keep that, and we have that for our next incarnation. So that's what I'm looking at and reading in that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's represented by the gates of Saturn, the gate of chaos, right? Which chaos in the realm of is a realm called in theosophy the cosmic physical plane. It's the entire cosmic physical, but for on a more microcosmic level, you could see it as the 18 lower subplanes, that you move in and out of through the gates of Saturn, according to the ancients anyway. According to decay, Saturn is the permanent atom of the cosmic physical plane, and therefore would naturally be the gatekeeper. It would control all the quote unquote comings and goings, right, between chaos and liberation. In fact, that the hierarchies that have moved beyond the cosmic physical plane are called liberated hierarchies. They've permanently moved beyond the gates of Saturn. You find this also in all the ancient mystery schools, this idea.
And then
I'm sorry, I was talking about the soul more like on the last slide, not this one where he was talking about it. It doesn't apply to this one. It wasn't this one. It was talking about leaving the soul.
About leaving the soul. This is what we've been on for a while now.
Okay, well.
This one? You mean this one? Oh, yeah, this one. Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah, right.
Yeah, it's talking about like the fourth initiation, I think, isn't it?
Well, I think there's a strong connection between what happens after death, the natural ascension and reabsorption in the soul, unconsciously, and then that conscious ascension through initiation. The two have parallels, right? It's just that the latter is a permanent ascension. Okay.
And then Mary has her hand up.
All right.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to ask to add some things. In some sense, agreeing with BL that the planets decay in esoteric astrology, he will say that we have the tropical zodiac, which is a thought form created by humanity in illusion, that we interpret these forces in our lower nature level. But as we connect more and more with the soul, these planets, they're actually conveyors of the ray lords. Then the energies of the rays get through these planets, and the planets on a higher octave, they represent these energies for us. They do not determine our lives on a lower level anymore, but they actually represent guidance for humanity on the soul level, right? So not to leave here the impression that the planets are a bad thing in our lives, right? It's we humanity that do that, right?
Right. Here, here, you know. The fact is, of course, they are all Ray Lords, or at least the seven sacred planets, and they have this personality influence as well, as long as that you are responsive to the form aspect. So, you know, most of us are responsive to both. You know, what's it? What does he say here about, you know, for Saturn, it's falsehood and evil plotting. Let me get back here. Yeah. That it, you know, when you go through the gates, you return falsehood and evil plotting. But, you know, the disciples see Saturn as the planet of opportunity. You know, it's that which shows the way forward, or one aspect of the way forward. So, yes, absolutely. I'm glad you chimed in, because this isn't necessarily exoteric. And that has its place, as long as we recognize that it's not the only truth out there. Right.
And I just want to add that, you know, in times of stress, we are prone, if we haven't taken that third or fourth initiation, we are prone to take the path of least resistance. And that is some of the uglier expressions of these signs. But as Mary said, the planets themselves, the signs themselves aren't in their nature bad. It's how we express that particular energy.
Yes, exactly. That's right. And, you know, even as disciples, when we do follow that path of least resistance, we have, you know, I bet everyone here has set up the observer, and you know you're doing it. You know you're being. I got to keep my language up and up. You know you're in error, right? Yeah, and that observer makes note of that, even though you're flooded with all those lower feelings and whatever is going on with you, you know. But there's this part of you that can see that happening and knows it. You know, you're not totally lost in it. That's where I think that's the distinction between the halls of learning and the halls of ignorance, right? You have set up the observer so that you can learn from your mistakes and not just dumbly repeat them. All righty, good conversation. Next up, can we get a reader, please?
Yes. Mary, can you read that for us, please?
Yes, sure. Then, being naked of all the accumulations of the seven rings, the soul comes to the eighth sphere, namely, the ring of the fixed stars. Here, freed of all illusion, it dwells in the light and sings praises for the Father to the Father in a voice which only the pure of spirit may understand. Behold, O Hermes, there is a great mystery in the eighth sphere. For the Milky Way is the seed ground of souls, and from it they drop into the rings, and to the Milky Way they return again from the wheels of Saturn. But some cannot climb the seventh runged ladder of the rings, so they wander in darkness below and are swept in eternity with the illusion of sense and earthiness.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, first up, then being naked of all the accumulations of the seven rings. Of course, these are the garments. You know, this is remember when Ishtar, those of you who have been with us a while, Ishtar went down to saved her beloved Osmond, and she had to take off jewelry at each level until she was finally naked as she entered that last and lowest realm, right? Well, this is just the reverse. In that case, as a god, those were like assets that she had to let go of. But, in the ascension, you drop the accumulations of the seven rings, right? And you come into the realm of the fixed stars. Gerald Massey, another favorite, gives us more insight into the cosmogony held as truth by so many of the ancients. Could we get a reader, please?
Okay, but first I want to say that Fred says Isabel Hickey called Saturn the angel of discipline.
That's, yeah, I like that.
Yeah. And Tara says it reminds me of the Egyptian Ankh, the different parts of the soul.
Yeah, it's the soul itself really isn't different, but it's the where the soul finds itself or the station that it is inhabiting, gives us that perspective of difference and even different names, for it. So from one point of view, Apollo and Persephone are the same, but there's a lot of intermediate steps between the two. Okay, can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Vivian, can you please read that for us, please?
The Arab astrologers make the eighth sphere to be that of the fixed stars. Over all, they locate the seven seas of light, which are only another form of the seven divisions of the Nun, or primordial water. In the Ptolemaic system, the Earth was central in the universe. It took the place of the mount. The planets ranged round at their respective heights in the same order as that of the Hindus. The stars were fixed in a sphere, so was each planet. They were sphere within sphere, like the coats of an onion. You could see right through to the outer one because they were crystalline. Each was moved by the friction of those beyond it. The ninth was said to cause the precession of the equinoxes, its axis being that of the ecliptic. A 10th was then added called the primum mobile, its axis being the equator and its extremities the poles of the heavens. The Chinese have a system of 10 heavens, the ninth being the primum mobile, which carries with it the 8 inferior strata. These are again surrounded by the 10th, called by Chu Fu Tse the hard shell heaven, and they also say the gods are 10, eternally tranquil and unmoved.
Thank you. Any questions about this? You can see how similar the systems are. I love this idea that they're actually spheres, crystalline spheres at these planets, and they're conditioning spheres as well, right? But we can see right through them all the way up to the highest level, Okay. Next, here, freed of all illusion, it dwells in the light and sings praises to the Father in a voice which only this pure of spirit may understand. So at first it sounds a lot like the Christian ideas of playing harps in heaven, but there is an esoteric side to this, which we discover in this TCF quote on sound. Could we get a reader, please?
Yes, Andrea, can you read that for us, please?
Yep. The key for man to discover and turn concerns itself with the revealing of the mystery of A, his own sound, B, his brother's sound, C, his group sound, D, the sound of that one of the heavenly men with whom he is connected, E, the sound of the Logos, or the sound of nature, of the solar system, of the grand man of the heavens. Therefore, A, on the physical plane, he finds his own note. B, on the astral plane, he finds his brother's note. Through identity of emotion, he comes to the recognition of his brother's identity. C, on the mental plane, he begins to find his group note. D, on the Buddhic plane, or the plane of wisdom, he begins to find the note of his planetary logos. E, on the Atmic, or spiritual plane, the note logoic begins to sound within his consciousness.
Okay, so this is the occult science, right? Here's an old commentary that gives us a different perspective on the same phenomenon. Can we get a reader, please?
I'll read that. Listen, O pilgrim, to the chanting of the word by the great diva lords. Hush, all earth vibration. Still the restless strivings of lower mind, and with ear intent hark to the sounds that rise to the throne of the Logos. Only the pure in heart can hear. Only the gentle can respond. The stormy sounds of all earth's struggle, the shrill vibration of the watery sphere, the crashing note marking the place of thought, dims the sound and shuts out the tone. He who is silent, quiet, and calm within, who sees all by means of light divine and is not led by light reflected within the threefold spheres, is he who will shortly hear. From out the environing ether will strike a note upon his ear, unlike the tones that sound within the world terrestrial. Listen, O pilgrim, for when that sound strikes in colorful vibration upon the inner sense, know that a point has been achieved, marking a great transition. Watch then, O pilgrim, for the coming of that hour. With purified endeavor, mount nearer to that sound. Know when its tone steals through the misty dawn, or in the mellow sunlight strikes soft upon the ear, that soon the inner hearing will become expanded, feeling, and will give place to sight and perfect comprehension. Know when the music of the spheres comes to you note by note, in misty dawn or sunny noon, at cool of eve or sounding through the deep of the night, that in their rhythmic tone lies secret revelation.
Thank you, Biel.
That is so beautiful.
It really is. So you can see the connection, between this, on the Atmic or spiritual plane, the note logoic begins to sound within his consciousness, and that's where the music of the spheres begins to be experienced, described here. Yeah, I love this. And if you're wondering why you should meditate, well, it's to avoid the shrill vibration of the watery sphere, the crashing note marking the place of thought. Right? I mean, we can all relate to this. Okay, next up. Behold, O Hermes, there is a great mystery in the eighth sphere, for the Milky Way is the seed ground of souls, and from it they drop into the rings, and to the Milky Way they return again from the wheels of Saturn. So this same belief was carried into Greece. According to Pythagoras, the Milky Way represented vast troops of souls that passed into and out of incarnation. Next, But some cannot climb the seven-runged ladder of the rings, so they wander in darkness below and are swept into eternity with the illusion of sense and earthiness. There are two ways to view this seven-runged ladder. First, as the ladder climbed and descended between each incarnation. We were just speaking of this, these two different ways. This was the point of view of the ancients. And second, the path of evolution leading permanently out of the material realm. Of course, both are going on at the same time. Assuming the first perspective, those who, quote, wander in darkness with the illusion of sense and earthiness are personality identified humanity and are thus unable to break the magnetic hold of the lower subplanes. Okay, next up, could we get a reader, please?
Yes. Eleonora, can you read that for us, please?
The path to immortality is hard, and only a few find it. The rest await the great day when the wheels of the universe shall be stopped, and the immortal spark shall escape from the sheaths of substance. Woe unto those who wait, for they must return again, unconscious and unknowing, to the seed ground of stars, and await a new beginning. Those who are saved by the light of the mystery, which I have revealed unto you, O Hermes, and which I now bid you to establish among men, shall return again to the Father, who dwelleth in the white light, and shall deliver themselves up to the light, and shall be absorbed into the light. And in the light they shall become powers in God. This is the way of good, and is revealed only to them that have wisdom.
Okay. First, the path to immortality is hard and only a few find it. This statement suggests that the seven-runged ladder represents the path of return. And it's true that in this fifth subrace of the Aryan race, few have transcended the personality influence of the planet, so a significant few. But as we move into the final two subraces, more and more of humanity will triumph over the grip of personality influence. Next, the rest await the great day when the wheels of the universe shall be stopped and the immortal spark shall escape from the sheaths of substance. If you attend the Secret Doctrine series, you'll recognize the quote-unquote great day as the great day be with us, called pralaya in Sanskrit, when the, quote, immortal sparks shall escape from the sheaths of substance. This, of course, is when we're freed of all form, all the inner jivas, that divine sparks within each of us, return to the absolute and become, again, one in unity. But, quote, woe unto those who wait, for they must return again, unconscious and unknowing, to the seed ground of stars and await a new beginning. In a systemic pralaya, all is frozen in situ to recommence in the next cycle. Thus, no evolutionary steps can be circumvented, right? This next segment describes a shortened version of the path of return to the Father, or monadic aspect. The white is the source of all color, here representing the diversity of the lower worlds, where he says the white light, right? Any thoughts or questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Efrosini says, does the return to brutishness occur in incarnation while the ascension to the eighth heaven occurs after death? as if this life in the body is a grave and death is a release. On the other hand, modern teaching emphasizes the plane where consciousness is polarized and not whether one is in incarnation or not. And then she goes on to say, as if the emphasis was on the body, that was the obstacle, while today the emphasis is on the consciousness.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. You know, returning to brutishness is, in fact, I think, just to incarnate, you know, the animal, what's called animal man, you know, that body that we brought with us from the third kingdom, right? So that's the return to brutishness, rather than the, you know, any kind of pejorative statement about a person's being brutish, you know. But I totally agree with you that it's more about identification with the state of consciousness and the plane of consciousness on which you are. Having said that, we still tend to lose our higher identifications as we move into the form aspect, right? And we usually have to recapitulate, you know, those who have made steps in their journey of awareness have to recapitulate in order to come to regain awareness on those levels, you know. So that's just part of the quote unquote brutishness, right? Thanks for that comment. Anyone else?
That's it for now.
Okay. So this next segment describes, wait a minute. All right. No, never mind. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Karen, can you read that for us, please?
Blessed art thou, O Son of Light, to whom of all men I, Pomandres, the light of the world, have revealed myself. I order you to go forth, to become as a guide to those who wander in darkness, that all men within whom dwells the spirit of my mind, the universal mind, may be saved by my mind in you, which shall call forth my mind in them. Establish my mysteries, and they shall not fail. They shall not fail from the earth, for I am the mind of the mysteries. And until mine fails, which is never, my mysteries cannot fail. With these parting words, Pomandres' radiant and celestial light vanished, mingling with the powers of the heavens. Raising his eyes into the heavens, Hermes blessed the Father of all things and consecrated his life to the service of the great light.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, first, blessed art thou, O Son of Light, to whom of all men I, Pymandri, the light of the world, have revealed myself. So the relationship between Pymander and Hermes brings to mind the Christ and the Master Jesus, except we have no record of the latter's communication, as we do here. As the self-proclaimed light of the world, Pymander joins the ranks of the highest avatars and associates himself with the fixed cross, the cross of light, in particular with Aquarius, for which the light of the world, along with Pisces, is a keyword. Actually, I should have said that Hermes joins the ranks of the highest of avatars, because Pymander is the unmanifested source, even though he deigned to reveal himself to Hermes. But it's Hermes who associates himself with this cross of light, and particularly with the light, as do all avatars, the light of the world. But the other lights are definitely relevant to his mission, as all avatars, as are all avatars. Okay, DK gives us further insight into the phrase light of the world. Could we get a reader, please?
Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Illumination, the light which irradiates the way. It is the light of the intellect, which really means that which illumines the mind and which can reflect itself in that mental apparatus which is held steady in the light. This is the light of the world, a reality which is eternally existent, but which can be discovered only when the individual interior light is recognized as such. This is the light of the ages, which shineth evermore until the day be with us. The intuition is therefore the recognition in oneself, not theoretically, but as a fact in one's experience, of one's complete identification with the universal mind, of one's constituting a part of the great world life, and of one's participation in the eternal persisting existence. From aspiration to illumination.
Yeah. Thank you, Martha. Okay. This phrase reveals the connection between the avataric light of the world and the all-pervading version of this light, which is an aspect of the intuition. You may remember that in the first paragraphs of the dialogue, Pyromander identifies himself as the universal mind. It's way back in the beginning. And then reiterates that all through this dialogue. Next, we have verification of the link between these inner and outer lights. In the next sentence, I order you to go forth to become as a guide to those who wander in darkness, that all men within whom dwells the spirit of my mind, the universal mind, may be saved by my mind in you, which shall call forth my mind in them. This is one of the more esoteric phrases, so beautifully said. This is the crux of the purpose of all avatars, right? Through the mind that is held in the avatar, they are able to call forth the mind, right, in them. In other words, they are able to link them to their own soul nature. Any thoughts about this? The term light could be substituted for the term mind. I see Yvonne's hand.
Yes. Go ahead, Yvonne. Yvonne, we can't hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, I said, I think this is exactly what you're doing, Fritz, with all your webinars. My mind, that all men within dwells the spirit of my mind may be saved by my mind in you, which shall call forth my mind in them. So your mind, your higher mind to mine, is awakening my mind to these truths that you're bringing to us. So you're, in a smaller way, you're taking the place of this avatar by you're bringing this, you're awakening our minds.
Well, thank you very much for your kind words. I'm hoping that the giving you this material and commenting on it and evoking response from you can in turn, evoke a response from your own higher mind. The difference between is though I had to is though I have to comment on it. The difference between me and a true avatar or a true teacher is that they are able to energetically impress upon their students' consciousness and literally reveal their own higher selves to them. They actually can. I mean, I had a root guru, and his presence had a very particularly and potent vibration. And when you were in that vibration, you became, I want to use the word lucid. You became clearer and more aware of your own spiritual self, and that's a whole other level of teaching, but I very much appreciate your kind words. Okay.
And then we have a comment from Tara. She says, the salt isn't salty anymore. So it adds flavor and brings it into the mind as we fight AI.
I like that. Yeah, the salt isn't salty anymore. You've aligned with its influence, right? And you can then embrace it as flavor. Okay.
And then we have several more comments.
Well,
Martha
good.
says, group attention leads itself to the impress, Francis. I think Yvonne was stressing Pymander's clarity unfolds as the community unfolds. Oh, the commentary unfolds.
Well, in this age, yeah, now we are, it's interesting. This whole thing is addressed to one person, a deity, the mind, impressing itself on an individual avatar, but with the purpose of of creating group consciousness among those who then end up following Hermes, those he's able to touch. So yeah, ultimately, especially in our time, it's through group awareness. It's one of the reasons that I'm excited about these webinars, is because it's just the beginning of understanding the nature of group awareness by aligning to the same great material. Thank
And
you.
then Ann Parker says, Francis, would you say a sannyasana is the same as an avatar?
Sannyasin, I'm not that versed. My understanding is that sannyasin is one who's turned towards holy things and that they exist at all levels. It's kind of like the equivalent of the Hindu equivalent to disciple, which has the Christ as a disciple. If you're an aspirant and you turn towards the light in any way, you could call yourself a disciple. Maybe a sannyasin would be the next step, that is, a real outer effort. It's a term used in India for those who have made a definite step towards practice that leads to the higher way. An avatar is a much, much higher level, even though there are many levels of avatars. You have an avatar of an age, like the Christ and the Buddha, and you have lesser avatars that, all the great saints, I think Neem Karoli Baba, Ramakrishna, are two. But you could even say that Martin Luther King was a kind of avatar, in that he brought light to a specific group of people. Anyone else?
And yes, Tara says, in my opinion, this is all about making the philosopher's stone, just like the Gnostic Gospels, alchemy text. Sorry, I can't talk right now. It's so fascinating to me, initiation work.
Isn't it though? And there's so many languages for it. We'll be looking into alchemy and the philosopher's stone, and just what that means. We've touched on it before, right? But yeah, it's all variations. I should say the language differs in order that, according to your ray type and where you're born in the world and at what age you're born, you will have a means to respond and walk the path. Anyone else?
No, that's all I see right now.
Okay, let's see. So next, I order you to go forth. Oh no, I just did that. Okay, next. Establish my mysteries, and they shall not fail from the earth. For I am the mind of the mysteries. And until mind fails, which is never, my mysteries cannot fail. Let's take this opportunity to review the concept of the mysteries, and we don't have time. We will start with this next time. It's just, we're actually going to do a little mini tutorial that will, be a little, help us to remember some of the material we've gone over in the past in terms of these mysteries. So that'll do it for today. You want to give dates for the next webinars?
Okay, the next secret teaching of all ages is November 6th, and that will be at 8 p.m. GMT because we have gone back into our standard time zones. Before I give the rest of the dates, Sanjay says Sannyasin in India means someone who has renounced everything, whereas avatar is the coming into being of the perfect one, someone who has perfected himself.
Yeah, and I think the sannyasin aspect is that's the traditional meaning of the term. I think that those who aspire and are in the process of renouncing are also called, it's traditionally you put on the robes at age 60, and you became a sannyasin. That doesn't mean you'd made the complete, transfer, but you were in process of doing it. But in an outer way, you do renounce. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah. Before.
And then the next secret doctrine is going to be on the 16th of October. So that's just 2 weeks away. And that's still going to be at 7 p.m. GMT because that's before we change. And then you've got your next TCF is on the 14th of October, right?
Yeah.
And is that, what time is that? 5 p.m. GMT?
Yeah, that's earlier than this, a couple hours earlier. So it's at 5 p.m. GMT. Just we followed the times that Michael set up when he began that coursework. So we're just staying with that. Yeah, so that's it. And we'll get into the exploration of the mysteries at the beginning of next time. And thank you all for coming. Much appreciated. BL?
We have,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we have a couple more comments I just wanted to. Anne says, thank you. I was remembering Master DK encouraging FCD and CDP to become the Sannyasin. Yes, he mentioned that to several of the disciples. And in that process, he did actually describe some of what the qualities he was trying to teach them were. And then Tara says, sounds like they're quantumly entangled avatar. And well, it says sunny side, but I think that was probably a correction to the Sannyasin. 3 light from, Heart from Utah. Okay, and then a whole bunch of thank yous. So
yeah, well, okay, just avatar is going to be a high initiate. We're talking about a master of wisdom or higher level that has been, unless you use the term more loosely, but, an avatar has a great responsibility. You have the Aquarian avatar who pours forth the waters of life, and then you have the saviors of the race, who are representative of the Piscean. That's the Christ, for instance. So it's a higher, definitely a higher form. All right, you all. Thank you.
Okay, and I just have one more thing to say, and I'm sorry that we're really dragging this out. Yoka says, can you please send me the future invitations for the secret doctrine? No, I can't. I'm sorry. I don't send those out. They come through constant contact, so you have to sign yourself up. But if you, and we have problems with certain internet people blocking our posts. So what I want to do is advise you all to go to morefederation.com. We have the weekly events there, and yeah, go to the weekly events.
It's right here. You see weekly Morning Federation events. By the way, the signups for my 3 webinars are right here. This isn't the full page. I've got a portion of this up, but so you see the secret doctrines right here. You click on that, and then you come into a page that allows you to do the sign up. For some reason, it's not wanting to go there. But then the weekly events, weekly Morning Federation events right here, and you click on that, and you get a list and of what's going on that week. You see that, right? But it's
and you'll see the secret doctrine there. You'll see the cosmic fire there. You'll see the secret teaching of all ages there. You'll see the full moon events. Anything that we've got going on for that particular week, you can always go double check it here if you're not getting the invitations. And these have the links there. So that you can participate. It also has the links to go to the recordings.
Just remember here at the top, moriafederation.com. That's all you need, because once you get in there, it's really easy. You know, on the home page, you have these 3, and just with one click away is pretty much everything. So, you know, I find sometimes I join the webinars that I'm going to host by clicking on these links, you know, so it's really the best way to do it. Don't count on, you know, getting an invitation. Here, let me go over here. Where is it? My Federation reminder. Yeah, this is one of the reminder links that you get, but that's not the one I wanted to show you. Here, this is the typical kind of constant comment, not constant comment. That's a T. What is it?
Constant contact.
Constant contact, right. This is what you get if you sign up for that. And these are great because they come out all the time. So how do you sign up for these?
Okay. You have to go back to the morefederation.com page, and it says, scroll down there on the left-hand side, see where it says sign up. You click on the sign up, and then what that does is that allows you, it gives you a dialog box, and you pick the kind of things that you want to see. And then that sets you up through the constant contact system.
Okay, hang on a sec. Let me find the sign up.
Okay, scroll back down there. See it, see the little sign there? It's under the spiritual life. No, you're not. Up.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
under
right
the
here.
spirit.
Duh.
Right. You click
Right
on
here.
that,
Everybody
and it
see
takes
this?
you. It
This is
takes
on
you
the
to the
home page.
form page.
So,
Right. This is
click here, and this is your form page. Okay, Yoke, I think that's how you pronounce it. This is where you want to go. You fill this in, and then you can get, you know, all of these different choices, right? And that way you'll get the notification I just showed you in my email. All righty?
yes, theoretically. But
Yeah.
again, because some of our lists are 500 names long, some of them are 700 names long. So what happens is some providers think it's spam and they don't even send it to you. We have a lot of people who have problems with that, which is why we have the weekly events page. So we have redundancies. And if you're not getting the invitations, even though you've signed up for them, you can always check the weekly events page and see what we have going. Okay.
Okay, a couple of things. So sign up, go to that page, sign up. And then if you're not getting them, go to your spam folder. And then often if you just click on and say, this is not spam, most services allow you to do that. Then you'll just start getting them, because they'll recognize that that particular thing is, not spam anymore. So then you'll start to get them. But, if you haven't gotten them and it's time to have a webinar, then go to moriafederation.com and you can sign up for it for the webinars that way. Okay, and last thing, this is personal, but I want to welcome back Carrie. I'm really glad you're back. I hope eventually your voice comes back to you, Carrie, because we all miss your wonderful reading style, especially on things like old commentary. So welcome back. I hope your voice returns to you at some point. And then the last thing is, BL, can you keep this webinar going long enough for me to read through the chats? Just a couple of minutes.
Okay. All right. And Tara says, what page are we on in the book?
Page 40, 41.
Oh, I was going to say 12, but.
Oh, you mean in Stoa?
Yeah.
Let me pull up. See, it always right there. See, page 40. That's the Roman numeral for 40. So that's where we are in the book. But if you don't have the folio edition, God knows what page it's on, because this has been printed in so many editions. Some of them small format, very thick, in which case it's going to be, much, another page number. But in the folio edition, the big book edition, it's on page 40. Okay. Are we done? Okay, I'm going to read the chats now. Thank you, everyone. Still reading. Hey, love.
Are you done?
Okay, BL, I'm done. Thank you.
sorry, are you there? Oh, you're gone? Okay, bye.